Hey guys, this is Samantha and Zessie.
It's February's very own Remoy George Philip. It just doesn't work. Remoy George Philip the first. That's it.
Honestly, whenever you say February, I get like flashbacks of just like being freezing cold walking around New York.
Yeah, I don't.
And I'm always like, why is he bringing up February? We're in May and everything's great. This is Masculinity, guys. Thank you guys for listening. We want to thank you for your patience because we know that we're releasing the episode a couple days late, but it's because it's going to be really good. And also, there's been some really awesome things going on for Mental Health Month. So the first thing I want to say actually is that your girl had an opportunity to talk about masculinity and gender as a lens to use when we're talking about mental health and gender equality at the American Psychiatric Association this week.
Samantha didn't even tell me this.
To be honest, it was kind of like I didn't think that it was going to happen. They mentioned it because I'm working with this organization called.
I want to be excited, but I'm kind of hurt because I don't know about this.
I'm sorry. To be honest, I didn't want to say it and then them be like, actually, no, we found somebody else. But what happened actually was that, they said it on Friday, and then on Monday, the day before, they sent out like a schedule, and my name was in fact on there. And on Tuesday,
you had your name on like an official schedule?
No, not on an internal organizational schedule. I mean, but it was.
Shout to Sam.
Thanks. I was really nervous, but I just was so honored and felt really privileged to be able to have a conversation in front of psychiatrists about this because it's just so important. And the World Psychiatric Association president is somebody who also really wants to make reforms in the psychiatric profession, and she's very invested in having women and girls and gender at the center of the conversation. And she's only the second woman ever to be the president of that association. So
what's her name? Her
name is Helen Herman. She's a very nice woman.
Zessie and Helen Herman.
Yeah, it's kind of insane.
Shout out to not including Remoy and letting interesting news happen.
Well, here's the thing. I've also realized that I'm a horrible communicator, which is interesting because I love to write and I love social media, and those are all forms of communication. But I'm actually seriously bad. So call me out on it if you see me. Remoy, call me out on it. I'm sorry. I'm really bad. I'm sorry. I never say anything about anything ever.
Well, never mind. Let me tell you something. Last week I was talking shit about weddings, and I still stand by that. But one of the main reasons is that it's happening. Usually weddings happen in the spring. But what also is happening in the spring is fucking NBA playoffs.
Oh, my God.
So I'm at a wedding on Friday night. And I'm like, I got to leave because LeBron's doing LeBron things. Or was that Saturday night? Whatever. I got to go. LeBron's playing, and who knows what's going to happen. And sure enough, LeBron did LeBron things. That game-winning shot was incredible. And he's just at that Jordan point now, and I hate to use that as, the vector, but, he's at that Jordan point where he just doesn't care. And he's just so good, and he finally is so confident in that fact. He can do whatever he wants on the court and be like, I'm going to just jog 90 feet and just throw a one-handed pirouette runner. And that shot's going to be his signature shot, I think. If they're going to change the logo to anything, it should just be LeBron pirouetting going like this. I
can't believe I missed that. I mean, I can't.
Wedding, shout out to the playoffs.
Yeah, I was at a Janelle Monáe recording party, which was not recording party, record release party, which was hella fun. That's why I missed it. It was free at Le Bain. Is that crazy? New York is amazing, guys. It's amazing between the months of April through September. Don't come outside of that. There's no point. All right, so it's only week 2 in Mental Health Month, and so we have plenty of things to talk about still. One thing that's important for us to think about is how we can tend to our mental well-being outside of a therapist's office, right? I mean, I think traditionally that's kind of what we think of. We think of mental health and mental illness, but the truth is, that it's really going to be especially helpful considering that men are less likely to go to doctor's offices, whether it's physical or mental illness. So this week, we are focused both on continuing the conversation that we started last week and the week before, meaning destigmatizing mental health by pointing out how helpful it is when we tend to it, and on highlighting the different places where mental health support can show up.
Yeah, I mean, something that we consistently talk about, and I fucking love talking about, are systems, right? We talk about how it's on us, all of us, to interact with that system, and also how it's up to us to kind of like infiltrate that system in order to make change and see each other differently if we ever expect to have, some sort of different results or outcomes. One thing that I know people are looking at firsthand in the mental health field is how to bridge various systems with mental health so that we can create an environment that encourages bringing mental health into focus. So if we focus that energy on what we're here to do, unmasking masculinity and challenging patriarchy and calling out this performance, how we perform masculinity for what it is, then we must invest in providing support to men so that they can feel free to be themselves and, deal with our pain more responsibly.
So one of the systems that we're going to be looking at today is education, and we want to take a look at how the educational system as it is today nurtures an environment in which such high rates of suicide can thrive among young boys, among them very, very young boys. And so we have a guest here today who can help provide some clarity on what the hell is going on. So Dr. Obari Cartman is a Chicago-based trauma-focused clinician and restorative justice coach with HELP, which LLC, which spells help, obviously, healing, empowering, and learning professions in Chicago public schools. He is also the president of the Chicago chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists and the program director of Real Men Charities, Inc. Dr. Cartman, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Real quick, can I go off script, Samantha?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you start off script? I love it.
Okay, so Dr. Cartman, let me just assume something. You're in Chicago. Have you been in Chicago for, let's say, 20 to 25 years?
In and out. I'm born and raised in Chicago, but I left for school, and then I came back after school. Okay, so can I make an assumption that you, to a certain degree, at least by default, are a native Bulls fan, to a certain degree?
Where this is going.
Yes, definitely by default. Absolutely.
Okay, so then you watched the Jordan do the Jordan things. Just where we're at with LeBron right now. There's always this stupid conversation that people have to have is who's the greatest or whatever. But just in the recent 2 to 3 weeks, what LeBron's been doing in the playoffs, how similar is it to Jordan from your point of view and your kind of proximity to the Bulls and Jordan?
I'm not a really good person to talk about sports, not because I don't like sports, but because I cannot detach anything that I talk about from the larger context that it sits within.
Ooh.
And so to just talk about his athletic ability is boring to me. For me,
Jordan
LeBron James gets the win.
Yeah, because he's a better human being.
Outside of the court, because of his work, because of his political stances, his fatherhood. I mean, the things that he represents. He's just a good guy across the board in ways that Jordan did not come across as. He was very silent throughout his career. He's made lots of money off of the backs of Black people and has not contributed, at least in public ways, to enriching these communities. I don't know how true it is, but there's lots of stories about him and the Jordan and the Nike corporations investing in prisons and making money off the privatization of that and all that kind of stuff.
Is that right? Oh, damn.
It's just hard to compare without comparing the whole people and what they represent off of the court.
I agree, and I am completely in line with that. I mean, with who Jordan was and what we've learned over the years about kind of what a terrible human being he was and how he kind of encapsulated a lot of the worst parts of masculinity that we're trying to combat. Versus who LeBron is as a modern man and what he's done for community, his family, and being an ambassador for whether it's the person of color community or the sports or professional athletes' rights as professional athletes. I think LeBron's way above and ahead, Mr. One and only Michael Jordan. Anyways, back to the script.
Well, I mean, before we do that, does anybody else think that LeBron wants to be president? Because I do.
I would vote for him.
I would so vote for him. I would vote for LeBron.
I don't know if I'd vote for. It depends on who was running against.
Right, yeah. Who would be the other Democrat?
I mean, I love LeBron. I can't hate on LeBron.
Would you vote for him over Oprah?
Hell no, I wouldn't vote for him over Oprah. What? No. Nope, I would not.
And there's our answer.
There we go.
All right. So Dr. Cartman, first of all, I just want to say that thank you for joining us. You're currently in Chicago. And so, thank you for calling in. I know it's a little earlier for you out there. Cool. Yeah, so your rap sheet is actually very long, and you're very involved in the community from a therapist / psychology background to also, I know that you do a lot of things around music, and so there are so many things that we can talk about, because really what we're after today is kind of, it's Mental Health Month. We're still very much committed to that agenda and to that push, and so we kind of want to talk to you about the ways that, both education and things outside of the classroom and outside of a therapist's office can contribute to better mental health, and how systematically we can ensure that happens. So the first thing, though, is can you just tell us a little bit about what had you get into psychology, and then, of course, why you chose to work with men?
Sure. So I always was into peer mediations in school. I did the programs. We had a program called Snowball where we had weekend retreats where we talked about drugs and sex and just small group kinds of stuff. So I always loved that kind of stuff, just finding out how people work, trying to help people. I like listening, problem solving. And so psychology was a good fit for all of those things. And I got into it. I went to HBCU Hampton in Virginia, and then got into Black psychology and starting to look at what were the specific contributions of scholars like Naeem Akbar, Wade Nobles, Francis Cress Welsing, Jawanza Kunjufu. There's a bunch of people that I was not reading, didn't have access to, even in grad school, because we become experts in the Freuds and the Skinners and the Watsons and a European version of how human development works and operates at optimal functioning. So psychology really became a really good place to merge my upbringing in African-centered communities, thinking about cultural identity, thinking about arts and music and these things as a part of well-being, and then applying the science of the mind and behavior to really think about how we can make communities actually well and not just presenting to be well.
Well, okay, so then when we talk about masculinity on this show and now talking about wellness, when we tend to take a broad general lens, right? And we have been focused on a lot of the performance of masculinity as a universal issue, meaning like a global issue. And while brushing over kind of certain inequities, we haven't really delved into the nuances of a lot of things. Now, we know you work specifically with communities of color, and more specifically Black men and Black boys. Why is it so important to you to focus on this community?
Other than me being a Black man who once was a Black boy, I also found that in the field of psychology that there weren't a lot of us. And so every time I would go to a center, a clinic, every time I would do work, they would be very excited to see a young Black man doing therapy. So I would get sent all the boys. I'll have caseloads full of just teenage, young adult men. And that became like my niche, just to do therapy with Black boys. And so over time, it developed into a book, which developed into a curriculum. And so people started to call me more and more just to talk specifically about how to work with their young Black male clients, with their sons, with their nephews, just because it became an area that I spent a lot of time thinking about, spending a lot of time with them. And so it just became an area of focus for me.
No, that's very native to your person and your experience. I'm assuming you have so much from your personal life that it kind of informs the way you work, or the way you at least started into the work.
Absolutely. And continue the work. So for me, a lot of what makes the work effective isn't that I come into a relationship or walk into a school or start a group with this doctor. I'm an expert on manhood. I've figured all this out. I'm still a Black man.
Sure.
Still living in the same world that we're living in. And part of the authenticity of the relationships that we get to build is that I present myself as continuing to struggle with the same things we're struggling with, and that we just want to open the space I can facilitate a dialogue. I'm not teaching you. I haven't, I'm not.
You haven't
not a
solved
PowerPoint
everything,
presentation.
right?
I have not solved all of the problems yet.
Sure.
But we collaboratively can work on it together, and then we've got to create the space and be honest and share of ourselves, and create the safe protocol for interrogation and reflection. And so even still, me being them being me, makes the work a lot more effective.
Well, okay. Well, then whether it's within the communities and the individuals that you work with, or whether it's within yourself, like how have you seen that performance of masculinity kind of manifest?
I think that the performance part is really the greatest. It's like the most obvious, but also the least acknowledged secret of men. That
talk about it. Okay. Yes.
It's just in my work, I get to see the other side of it. Like I get to see, like we work in the dark. It's an underground railroad of sorts. I create this safe space off into the corner where I get to hear men talk about their vulnerabilities. I create the space where they, it elicits this, this honest, authentic kind of sharing. So I get to see what most people don't get to see. But I also know once we finish talking, once the therapy session is over, once the group is over, that all of the men, including myself, go back out into the world and do what we are so practiced at, which is just performing power, performing competence, confidence. The secret is that we spend so much time trying to think about, how do I look the part? How do I say the right things? It's almost like a script. I don't know if men would admit that sometimes we rehearse. How do I go into a room? How do I engage in a relationship? How do I show up in wherever I'm at and practice this performance of strength?
Sure. We talk about this casually on the conversation, or with actually go very in depth on this. But like to you, to all of us, even you, Samantha, and myself especially, like what? For an audience member who's like, okay, you guys keep talking about the performance of masculinity, but I don't really understand what you're talking about. What are examples, like tangible examples of that performance, of that manifestation of masculinity?
For me, one of the ways I think it displays itself most clearly is through emotional experience. So one of the things, again, that I know as a psychologist is that men have a wide range, an array of emotional experiences, from guilt to shame to hurt to abandonment to regret to sadness to, all types of pain and disappointment. And so we have these bodies of experiences. Our bodies work just like everybody else's bodies work. We get tensions in our stomachs and our shoulders get tight, all these things that are happening. But the part of the performance is to pretend like none of that is happening, to constantly walk around and pretend like this world of hurt and pain and shame is just not even there. Like you bottle it up. So part of the wall, it serves to protect from people from coming in, but it also contains all of this emotional experience in this little tiny brick wall box inside of us. And we just gotta keep on going. Just say man up. It means don't even experience the pain, but certainly don't express it, and just pretend like everything's fine. Just pretend like everything's cool. Your heart got broken by a girl. No, it didn't. I'm fine. I don't care. She didn't affect me in that way. It's completely the posturing of being unbothered is assumed to be positioning a position of strength because of the masculinity sort of doctrine. But I think that part of the presentation is just to always seem cool, to always seem like mellow and peaceful, regardless of what happened in the day, regardless of what traumas you've experienced, regardless of the truth that the presentation is. Maybe I can express anger, maybe, because that still is associated with a sense of power and strength. It's at least, again, the performance of power and strength, but not actual power or strength. And so for me, emotions is one of the clearest ways that you can be sad, you can be depressed, but you still got to put the suit, the tie on, you can put the hat to fit it on, you can put whatever it is you put on to present as if I'm still strong, I'm still a man, I still got everything together. From a boy to an old man, that we practice this performance, that we deny the experiences that are happening in our body. We find ways to cope with it, to distract ourselves from it, to remove to numb the pain, whether it's through sex or weed or money or violence or whatever it is that we find in the moment. But the truth is that we have a tapestry of emotional experiences that we have to hide most of our lives.
I have a quick question, or maybe it's not a quick question, but humor me. Since you work with boys, I'm wondering, like, watching these young men and then in contrast to boys, like, at some point within your adulthood, you normalize this performance of masculinity where it becomes your absolute default. You turn off so much that you assume that is your normal. However, at a younger age, I'm assuming you're like learning the practices of what it means to perform said things, so it's not your normal yet, and you haven't turned off everything else, and you haven't assumed that it's your default. So do you find that like there's that kind of dramatic difference between what we're calling boys and men in the association with the performance and wearing like the putting on the mask or not putting on the mask, seeing the mask, seeing the performance, being more open to their emotions, and so on and so forth?
Yes, absolutely. I got two boys. I got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So you see it real clear with young kids. They feel and express the full range of human emotions in seconds, and then go right to the next one without thinking about it. If they don't like it, they cry. If they're mad, they throw it.
They'll hug
happy,
anybody.
They smile. They hug. They smile. So the range of emotions includes joy. Like, it includes smiling. Like, black men can experience joy or laughter, but still feel like you got to express this tough interior to not be vulnerable enough to throw your head back and have a real actual belly laugh, right? So it's not even just the sad stuff. It's just the whole range of emotions we have to stuff inside. So certainly for younger kids, you see them, they play, they are completely themselves in a way that's completely free. But then we start to see it and we shape it. We see it. We say, no, the boys don't do that in this place, or you don't express your fear or your sadness publicly or out loud at all. Stop crying, walk it off, shake it off, man up. You say that to boys, like as soon as you see them interacting with the world, and then that just becomes a part of, as you say, the normal way that you're supposed to present yourself in the world. I found that right before high school is a really special age. There's something about an innocence, a light that's still shining in the boys' eyes in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. That for me, gets dimmer right around high school age. Something about that crossing over.
High school's a war zone. You need. High school is such an emotional war zone, and there's so many hormones going, whether it's within the individual or just the community as a whole. Like, you immediately have to bolster your defense systems in those 3 to 4 years. Anyways.
So I have a question, actually, because, you kind of went into a very kind of like live and a lot of imagery about like the experience of men and bottling up their emotions and, not having like the belly laugh and all of that. And what I'm kind of interested in getting into is, kind of going back to your, your experience of like being the only black man psychologist in your realm when you were studying, and how you feel that, as we talk about like bottling up emotions, right, which then can turn into anxiety, depression, or whatever it is, or even just like numbness, or, whatever the case is, how you feel that basically contextualizing it in black masculinity. So like for me, I feel like there's just this, I was thinking about this morning, like the way that, generally speaking, men and women are barely different, right? And so there's certain we're just socialized very differently. And so when I'm thinking about like, like white masculinity, let's say, or like dominant masculinity versus like the dominant standard masculinity versus like black masculinity, and the societal like systems and oppression that black folks endure all along the gender spectrum, how that informs the performance of masculinity for black men and boys, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. So part of the conundrum of being a black man is finding ourselves in a capitalistic structure that requires hierarchies and categories that are very clearly delineated, where white is over black and all the other people of color, and men are over women, rich is over poor, cis heteros over everything else. And so we have these categories and hierarchies where Black men find themselves in between. On the one hand, we're up. On the other hand, we're below. And so it means that there becomes this grappling with power that I think is unique for Black men, where we are in a world where we see white men enjoy and demonstrate power in a way that I feel like is in some ways a natural human desire to want to achieve power. I think the power over is unnatural, but to be independent, to be able to control your communities, to be able to feed your families, just to be able to have enough power to survive is a natural human thing. And so I think that everyone desires to be able to have that, to be able to maintain themselves, to maintain their families and their communities. But Black men are in places where we generally cannot maintain the control, don't have enough power to dictate what happens in the communities we live in, from the schools to the food to the land. Like, we don't own the things that we find ourselves in. And so it becomes a pressure to try to sometimes mimic what white male dominance and power looks like without having the actual power that they have, but also trying to, in the places where we do have power, like over women, even if it's in our minds, or over young people, or over LGBTQ communities, wherever we can find a lower sense of power, to compensate for that powerlessness in comparison to the American system. We try to, again, create, even like the gang structures in Chicago are just a mimicry of the feeling of power, of supposed temporary, created false illusions of power. And Black men have that conundrum, I think, more distinctly than other groups, just because of our male privilege does not allow us to exercise the full range of power that maleness comes with, because of our Blackness becomes a mark of oppression. And there's systemic barriers to actually, just getting jobs. Just, unemployment rates for Black men are out the roof. Graduation rates, and just the marks of traditional success. Black men have been struggling with for a very long time. And so in lieu of that, we have to go outside of these institutions where you can get work, get employment, get education, and find false power in the street, or find power over in our homes. And it's a setup that is a unique thing, I think, for Black men.
One thing that I want to speak to that you mentioned a few times is like the power versus power over. And on this podcast, we've talked at length about, well, I know I have, and I think that Remoy agrees, is like how real power is actually vulnerability. And I think one of the things that you're pointing to is, power versus power over, power as agency, power as independence, power as, agency really, versus power over, which is domination. I mean, it's domination. And I think that, when we talk about masculinity, we talk about the performance of masculinity, we're really talking about our men's or masculine presenting folks' ability to dominate others, which when we talk about that, we rarely talk about like what that domination, like in order to if you, the need to dominate somebody comes from not feeling like we are powerful ourselves, right? I mean, I feel like it's kind of a compensation of the lack of power, the lack of confidence,
right.
the lack of whatever that we feel. And
right.
I wish that when we talked about power, just as you did, we kind of made a difference between agency or fearlessness, kind of how I view vulnerability, honestly, and then like domination, which is actually a compensation for like a weird type of emptiness, right?
Yeah.
And so in that vein, actually, so I know that you're an educator, and that you, like, what I really want to get to is one of the things that you said when I was at your presentation in Harlem months ago now, is you mentioned how the education system is basically not tailored to accommodate certain kids' needs. I mean, I would venture to say, honestly, that the education system is shit for everyone, but because of a specific disadvantage that, Black kids face, that, you were talking about like the reading levels for young boys and like how it's for young Black boys and how it's like lower than other communities. And so, when we're talking about the performance of masculinity and that lack of power, that lack of agency, I just wonder how you feel education can do better to kind of remediate that.
Well, at the basic level, reading levels just reminds me of the importance of just doing like the base fundamental job of being able to prepare young people to compete in the world that requires literacy. And so the chart I showed at that presentation was 8th grade reading levels from some major cities around the country. And
right,
on average, there's about 10% of the 8th grade boys that are performing at proficient level in terms of their literacy. And the reason that's important, that age range, 8th grade, is important because at that age, like, they've been children the whole time. So somebody might see that and say, well, that just confirms what I thought, which is that Black boys are less capable, they're less intelligent, they have less desire to perform and to be scholars. But by 8th grade, if you think about an 8th grader, you look at them, you see the kid in their eyes. You're reminded that they've been children the whole time up until 8th grade. And so what that means is that they've been failed from 1st through 8th grade. Somebody did not do their job. That the school systems did. The school systems failed. Not the kids failed, but the school systems failed. Or if you're going to be cynical about it, they performed their duty properly. If the idea is that they're designed to be cogs in a machine of the status quo, then they're not broken and they're actually just doing what they're designed to do. Either way, they set the young people up to not be able to be successful and to not be able to use literacy as one basic tool to be able to navigate a system that requires finances to be able to have power in the system, power as agency, and to be able to feed children and to be able to have houses and mortgages and healthcare, like just basic kind of stuff. That literacy is a requirement for that. And so if a system is failing you and it puts you in a disadvantage at 8th grade, then sends you to high school at a disadvantage, then what you're speaking to just before about the lack of real power, then having to compensate for that is a byproduct of the education system not doing its job for Black boys in particular. So the reading levels that low for that group in particular just speaks to a particular type of failing that a system is doing for these kids. And they don't see it like that. People don't see it like that. People just, we have this very individual analysis. They need to do better, work harder, pull their pants up, say the right things, put a bow tie on, and then everything will be fine. But not thinking about what it means to be in a system where there's literal opposition at every way. And opposition sometimes look like the police or sometimes look like mass incarceration. But if it's school, it's harder to see it because school is supposed to be a good place. You got to send your kids to school. We still do it, even if we know what the numbers are. But if we know that school's not preparing them, then that should challenge us to think, how do we compensate for that as a community? How do we supplement what the school's not doing? And for the reading levels, we're just talking basic ABCs at this point. Ideally, what we need to be talking about are having the schoolhouses be responsible for using the 8 hours they have in the day to also teach social emotional development, to also teach proper historical context, to also teach current social, political, economic context to really help the young people see the world they're living in. And in lots of ways, the schools and the teachers and the staff aren't equipped to do that because the training does not give them that. But if we want people to come out of school whole human beings, prepared for a world that is competitive and demanding and requires a certain amount of agency, then the school has to be accountable for doing that kind of prep that it is very clearly has not been doing.
Okay.
That's real.
Now, you talk about emotional and mental support within schools. What are, just practically speaking, what would that look like in a perfect world for an education system or a school or a classroom to provide those tools, or to what do those tools look like?
I think the beginning of it looks like dealing with the inherent bias of being an American that all the people are subject to, where we see certain groups of people and we make mental associations with them It's not a brand new thing. The part of why slavery was justified was because of an attempt from the science to the politicians to the religions to paint a picture that certain groups of people, Black people, are less than human, are ape-like, are monkeys, don't experience pain in the same way, don't deserve the full human rights and dignities. 3/5 of the people, all these kind of narratives are very old. And when a teacher who was born here, who has not done the work to investigate their own biases, walk into a classroom, there's no way to all of a sudden disassociate the trainings that everybody has, that certain people are less deserving, less capable, have less ability, are less than in whatever ways that we see, and that has to impact the way that they present information. One of the things that looks like, one of the ways that looks in terms of the school, from the restorative justice perspective, is that even as a psychologist or a counselor, I see misbehavior in a very different way than a mind that's trying to control and dominate, and has that association with power, that if someone is disrupting the order of my classroom, then I have to try to find a way to control them, to remove them, to see them as disposable, as opposed to the question that I have when I see a young student acting up, trying to seek attention for whatever reason. My question is always, every single time, what happened to that kid? What is he going through? What is he thinking about? What is this misbehavior at this age representing that he cannot speak with his mouth because he doesn't have the language or the skills? And what is the school's responsibility to then use that opportunity to find a way to teach that language, to give space to process whatever experience he had that is manifesting as misbehavior, that the school automatically thinks of as something to get rid of, but we need to have teachers and staff and administration see as opportunities to help learn and develop social emotional skills. And so the restorative justice movement is getting at that in institutional ways to help reform some of the practices and suspensions and detentions and that kind of thing. But I think that just in the classroom, it just begins with learning to rest and sit and investigate your own biases, to be able to be a proper instructor, and to also be challenging of whatever the curriculum is. The people that are designing, choosing the books, that are figuring out where you start your history at. For Black people, it's always slavery,
Yep.
which is always a disadvantage. It's also just not the truth.
Yeah.
They're still teaching Columbus. I mean, they're just teaching blatant lies in the school building that sets particular communities up for the same conundrum we've been talking about, which is how do you situate yourself in authentic power, historically, culturally, social, emotionally, and the school is not doing any of that, from what I see.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's a perfect segue to what we want to my next question for you. But first, it's just like what you described is the perfect, like a perfect kind of culmination of the ways that every single system that was thought to be objective, was thought to be based in science, was thought, I mean, we're talking like physical science to social sciences with the psychology, psychiatry, sociology, all of that was created in a racist context. And it's like, if we're not willing to have the conversation and to actually reform, we're just bequeathing all of these notions to our kids, and that includes notions about, you know, performative masculinity. So it's like, you know, yeah. So, but my next question actually is, you know, when we met at the, you know, at the bookstore in Harlem, you mentioned different, like using different forms of community activities to generate happiness, to kind of open up. I mean, I feel like it was like having to do with some kind of like, you know, like chakra type of energy, but I'm not well enough versed to actually ask you that question. But I know that it was like about drumming and being able to kind of use rhythm and the body to kind of open up our emotional sensors, and how that can be really helpful when it comes to just like generating joy and happiness for men. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that, like, I really appreciate, like, in Mental Health Awareness Month, but in general, I think I appreciate the popularity, the trendiness of mental health in the lexicon of the public square. The problem with that as a professional that I see is that it means that more people are being open to therapy, seeking mental health services. The stigma is loosening in lots of ways in the Black community and other communities. But we have not done as much work to think about increasing access to services. And so for me, that requires an ethical responsibility of providers to not stay as comfortable in our offices, dependent on the insurance systems, resting on our licenses, but to find ways to meet this new need that people are becoming more aware of and comfortable with, to seek services, to look at therapy, to meet with counselors, to be more vulnerable. If we're asking the community to do that, then we have to go to where the community is and make it more accessible. And for men in particular, I think that you're less likely to get, particularly young men, like a teenage boy is less likely to come to a space where you say, like a woman might be more attracted to a sister circle where you're coming and you're sitting around and, you know, a book club or meditation group or yoga, whatever the things that, I don't know, are more easily accessible, men still won't go to. And so I've been finding drums, hip hop, self-defense classes, different types of movement as a way to catch their attention. Cooking, one of the organizations I work with is called Real Men Charities. We do a Father's Day event called Real Men Cook. So you're just using food as a way to get the attention. So men will come for that. They'll come to barbecue. They'll come to drum. They'll come sit in the circle. We listen to hip-hop, watching videos, print out lyrics, decoding the thing. We have in therapy, I ain't got to call it that. It don't have to be as touchy-feely as they expect it to be. It could still be packaged and the language could still be appealing to them. And I think that it becomes our responsibility as providers to figure out that balance, that how do you still do the work, but do the work that is in a way that's appealing to them. So drums is good for that, just in terms of having men sit in the circle, getting some of the aggression and the anger out, but also making the connections between the historical trauma that included disconnecting us from the cultural practices, the rituals, the spiritualities, the understanding of self that had to be abruptly removed from us. It wasn't that we forgot how to drum. It wasn't that we forgot our rituals, but it was stomped out of us in order to keep us in a state of, you know, confusion and sorrow and willingness to just be at base level surviving. But to live for real, to experience joy, to connect to culture, requires getting back to some of these ancient practices and rituals that we were disrupted from. So drumming is that too. It's not just the exercise, it's not just the rhythm, but also just one of the ways that is a good entree to beginning to repair the damage that enslavement did to our communities, and looking at mental health from a lens of a larger historical trauma, and not just your mama didn't give you what you needed, and so that's what's wrong with you, but really unpacking the whole thing much more holistically. Culture and music and hip-hop, all of that helps me do.
Kind of as a segue from that, I think that one of the really, really key points that you made in the conversation that, you know, at this presentation that you held was how hip-hop and these basically kind of our culture is being appropriated for material gain. And specifically, I would go further and say that it's providing a certain level of educational misvalue, if you will, by modeling certain behaviors and certain forms of masculinity and certain forms of just interacting with one another within the Black community that are kind of toxic, right? And so, you know, our resident therapist Justin Leoy, who's been on the past couple of shows, you know, underlined for us the importance of parents and just mentors, whomever, modeling the behaviors for children, for younger people, that, you know, that would be useful. And so, you know, as we talk about music, we talk about education, we talk about masculinity, I wonder what you have to say about that.
Well, first I want to be clear that like calling hip hop dangerous is too broad a way to use hip hop.
Okay.
If you to really unpack the industry, you know, and we do this. I'm with the boys. We ask them what their favorite, who they listen to. We print the lyrics out, talk about the music, but most of it is the radio popular kind of stuff, which means that behind them are distributions and labels and CEOs, and we do, you know, we got the phones on our hand, we got the internet available. So I always ask who they listen to, and then I try to figure out who their bosses are. Every single time, it's always white CEOs, boardrooms full of white people. And so that does not mean that hip hop has been broken. It means that we still have enemies, and those enemies are still invested in maintaining a system as it is, and they figure out a way to use a certain type of music and sound and vibration as an avenue of that destruction. Hip hop has still been, as an art form, very pure and relevant and powerful. There's a bunch of brilliant artists out there that are making brilliant music, that are using drums and rhythm and words and voice to deliver messages that are empowering, that help us think critically. So I do two things in my work. One is to highlight and showcase the breadth and depth of music that's contemporary, that's powerful, that's good. It's not even like corny, but like the skillfully done that aren't on the radio, but does not mean it's not hip hop. It just means it's not corporate hip hop. And so to point to still corporations as a problem, still points to capitalism as a problem, still points to some white people who have invested and benefit from racism and white supremacy and oppression. Like that is still a problem. But to detach that from hip hop, and in some ways you still got to wrestle with the artists that decide to engage and sell their people out for some trinkets. And you got to look at them too, but don't miss their boss. Don't look at who they're working for, because those people, you'll find a common historical enemy when you do it in that way. But it's important to also, you know, help the young people be more just general aware consumers of the world they're living in and the ideas and everything they're intaking. Like it's just from food to ideas to music to art to books in school. Just be more aware of what you're intaking. And music has a really good way of making you, of lulling you to sleep. And so right now, because the technology has advanced much faster than the communities have, we've moved away from having one TV in the house. So even if the TV is stupid, you could sit around and talk about it. But right now they plug directly into their ears. So the corporations have direct access to our young people's direct earbuds in ways that is very dangerous. And so to talk about the music and to print the lyrics out just allows for us to begin to bring conscious awareness to the content. So if you say you like a song, I can say, oh, word, what you like about the song? If they usually just say the beat or the sound of the hook. But then when I print the lyrics out, I say, do you like this line? Do you like what he's saying? Do you like this notion, this disrespect of women? Do you like this glorification of drugs? Do you like this random violence? And no, I don't like any of that. But I still, you know what I mean? So to even to interrogate what it means to like a thing, the music allows me to have conversations. So then, you know, I'm not going to dismantle the corporate radio mechanism tomorrow, but I can prepare more young people to hear a song, to listen to a song, not even don't listen to the music no more, but like really actually listen to the music is my main message, so that you can hear what you're saying, so that you can at least disarm to some degree the unconscious power of the repetitive messages that become education, that become building blocks of character, that become who a person becomes or feels like they have to present themselves as. And I think we can cut through that just by making them aware of what they're listening to and exposing them to other content through hip-hop, through music that is healthy and positive and productive.
Yeah, and I mean, because what you're essentially pointing to is people having ownership over the things that they're doing rather than kind of just like being in this current of popular culture that, you know, and honestly, if I'm being honest, you know, your book launch is the reason why I don't like Migos. Because and like, I mean, I'm 33. Like, it's not like I'm not saying that 33-year-olds don't listen to Migos, because we all know that they do. But I'm saying, like, it's not like I'm still listening to like Tribe Called Quest and still listening to
Right.
like older records and stuff. So like for me, Migos is like something that I still have to like that I had on my list to listen to and figure out. And and after that presentation, I was like, why is everybody listening to Migos? This is crazy, you know?
Right.
So anyway, so we just want to really thank you profoundly for all of the knowledge that you dropped today. I mean,
Look, like in Chicago, there's the United Center, and outside the United Center, there's a golden statue of Michael Jordan. Let's just tear that down.
wow.
Let's build a gold, bronze Dr. Obari Cartman statue.
Oh,
I'd go to Bulls
like
games
it.
all the time, man.
That's it.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Cartman. Like, this has been one of our better recordings. Just like such an informative conversation and dismantling this idea of the performance of masculinity, but also how our educational system needs to get better, but then how we're all responsible for that, and then also transitioning into music and how our music industry needs to be better, but we also need to be more attentive of our young people and our own ears about the music we're listening to and how we're informed by that music.
Yeah.
It's been such an incredible conversation, so thank you again.
Yes, for your full
Thank you.
range
Thank you for having me.
expertise. Yeah. So yeah, can you tell the people where to find you? If you have anything to...
Yeah, I got a website, www.drobaricartman.com, DROBARICARTMAN. I'm on the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams at ocartman1, and that's the best way.
Okay, cool. We'll be posting your information as well. Yeah, because you have a lot of knowledge to share, and I was very pleasantly surprised to, well, not surprised, but pleasantly acquainting myself with all of the range of your work. So we just want to really honestly just like, I'm very grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing. And, I'm hoping that this will be kind of an opportunity for people to be inspired to kind of develop their own full range expertise and to, really just spread the word on people being free to be themselves and paying attention to what they put in their minds and in their bodies. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And so, for all the listeners out there, please feel free to comment. We'll be posting Dr. Cartman's information on all of our social media. As you guys know, we say it every week. We are at Twitter at Masculinity Podcast. No, damn. I always mess this up. Masculinity Pod with a K, and on Facebook at Masculinity Podcast, again with the K. You can shoot us any emails you want at masculinitypodcast@whoistheo.com. So we just want to thank you for listening. Please be sure to hit us up. My name is Samantha and Zessie.
My name is Remoy George Phillip, the first.
And this has been Masculinity. Thank you. Ciao.
Peace.